Welcome to the short executive knowledge lecture on topic 5, paper 9, covering currency and commodity derivatives. Now, we will be looking at currency derivative products as listed in the contents page, pricing of currency derivatives. We'll be looking at hedging using currency derivatives and trading strategies for currency derivatives. We will then move on in section 5 to commodity derivative products. That's not foreign currency. That's what we're starting with. We're moving on to commodities. We'll be looking at pricing the commodity derivatives, hedging using commodity derivatives, and finally trading strategies for commodity derivatives. Now, I will emphasize the important points to help you understand the core material you need to know to sit the exam, and a copy of the study notes you see on the screen can be downloaded from the Executive Knowledge website. As ever, I strongly recommend that you supplement this learning with question practice, and the practice questions are provided on the platform Examinator.online. Okay, let's get into the material, starting with currency derivative products. And you will see that the majority of currency derivative products are traded over-the-counter, OTC. There are some traded on exchanges, but the majority OTC. Now, the currency derivatives that we'll be considering, currency forwards, high volume, are traded. Foreign exchange swaps, currency options, non-deliverable forwards, and exchange-traded currency derivatives. We'll be looking at the descriptions, the definitions, and then we'll move on and look at the pricing. Now, currency forwards are over-the-counter agreements to buy or sell a quantity of currency for delivery at some time in the future at an agreed price, a strike price. And you're locking into an agreed exchange rate, which takes away any risk of exchange rate moving between the time you enter currency forward and when you settle. Foreign exchange swaps are agreements to buy or sell a quantity of currency on one date and reverse the transaction at a later date. So you're buying or selling and then just taking the currency back or selling on the currency. You're in effect swapping currencies for a period of time. And we're told that FX swaps, most popular FX transaction type in Hong Kong, and they're used in the interbank fund market by financial institutions. Now, the last two bullet points I would say are the important ones. An FX swap is made up of a spot FX transaction. So the transaction is being carried out at today's exchange rate, followed by a forward transaction, and that's known as spot to forward date swap. Then we're told that FX swaps can occur where both the first and second halves or legs happen in the future, and they are known as forward against forward swaps. So it's the terminology that can be examined: spot to forward and forward against forward. Currency swaps are similar to interest rate swaps, but with currency swaps, the two borrowings are in different currencies. You swap the principals at the beginning of the swap. With an interest rate swap, you do not swap the principals. And the interest payments are paid gross, not net. With an interest rate swap, the interest rate payments are netted off because they're in the same currency, not so with a currency swap. And so at the bottom of page 5.3, you can see the common stages: exchange of principal amounts, exchange of interest rate payments, and that's gross, and then the reversing exchange of principal amounts. And we give the diagram at the top, page 5.4, that reflects that relationship, and the bullet points afterwards that describe what is going on. Highly likely you'll get a question where you have to make a distinction between an interest rate swap and a currency swap, so be aware of their characteristics. Section 1.4 on currency options. This gives the buyer the right, as with any option, not the obligation, to buy or sell a certain amount of foreign currency on or before a fixed future date, that's the expiry date, as with options, at a specified exchange rate, that's the strike price. They can be used to hedge against adverse movements in FX rates. And as I've said, the specified exchange rate is the strike price. Now, the premium, this is important. Premiums for currency options are expressed either as a percentage of the currency amount or as a number of exchange rate points. And we'll see an example shortly where that is used. Now, non-deliverable forwards is where you don't actually deliver the underlying currency at some time in the future. You net off in another currency, which is usually US dollars. So we're told that they're similar to currency forwards and they're used where countries impose FX restrictions, China being a classic example. Rather than settling the forward trade with the exchange of principal, the non-deliverable forward settled on a net basis with the settlement currency, usually US dollars. And renminbi, China currency, important example in Hong Kong. And they allow market participants to hedge currency risks associated with activities in developing economies where there may well be foreign currency controls, despite not being able to directly access the market for the currency in question. Moving on to section 1.6, the last of the different derivative types, exchange traded derivative products in Hong Kong. Now, this is bringing us up to date. We're told that Hong Kong Exchange and Clearing introduced the world's first deliverable renminbi currency future, and that allows investors to hedge or take on renminbi exposure. Now, the futures contracts traded on a margin basis, which is normal, and settled at expiration with delivery of US dollars by the seller, payment of renminbi by the buyer. So remember that relationship. The underlying asset is 100,000 US dollars of renminbi. Again, be aware of that. The contract is quoted in standard interbank FX terms, renminbi to US dollars. For example, 6.5 renminbi per US dollar. And we're told that in March 2017, Hong Kong Exchange launched its first renminbi currency option, helping participants hedge currency risk more efficiently. Okay, now let's move on and look at pricing of all these instruments. And the first one is the main one, and you will be examined at paper 9 on this, and this is the pricing of currency forwards. And the forward rate, as you can see on page 5.5, is equal to the spot rate multiplied by the interest rate differential of the two countries. And we express that by 1 plus the interest rate of the numerator country. That's the country whose currency is on the numerator of the relationship, divided by 1 plus the interest rate of the denominator country. I will explain with the following example. It says calculate the 1 year forward exchange rate, the following information. British pound, US dollar spot rate 1.35. Now remember that the format used in the study guide, and it can be in the exam, the GBP to US dollars actually means US dollars per pound. So we're given 1.35, that's 1.35 US dollars per UK pound. We're told the UK interest rate 3%, US interest rate 0.75%. So what is the forward rate? We take the spot of 1.35 and multiply it by 1 plus the interest rate of the numerator currency. And the numerator currency is the US dollar, US over pound. So it's 1 plus 0.0075 divided by 1 plus the interest rate in the UK, 3%, that's 0.03. And that gives us a forward rate of 1.32. Now, you may not have to do that calculation. It could be worse. They'll give you the forward and ask you to calculate the spot, or they'll give you the forward and the spot, and they'll ask you to calculate one of the interest rates. It's a must-know formula. Moving on, top of page 5.6, pricing foreign exchange swaps. So spot against forward date swap. We looked at this category a little earlier. Swap involves a spot transaction for the first date, forward transaction for the second. Convention for pricing the spot is to take the spot mid-rate, that is the mid-rate between the buy and sell. Second date's calculated as a forward transaction, as we've just done. With a forward against forward, two dates can be calculated as parallel forward transactions. We then subtract the forward margin for the first date from the forward margin for the second to obtain the swap quote. Now in the material, this is described. but we're not given worked examples. So I'd generally be aware of the concept. But as I say, that formula on page 5.5 is a must know. 2.2, possibly, I would say it's peripheral. 2.3, pricing currency options is very similar to pricing normal options, stock options, index options, and we know that they're made up of the intrinsic value and the time value. And the time value can be broken down into a number of elements that you've seen before. However, interest rate differential is one of the factors. That's the interest rate differential between the two currencies. Okay, what about implied volatility? Volatility is in the calculation of the time value of the option. It's in the Black-Scholes-Merton model. But if we know the market value of the option, we work backwards and we can calculate what the volatility measure must be to justify that market valuation. And we refer to that as implied volatility. Some people will put historical volatility, what has been observed, standard deviation of the price movements, into the formula to get an estimated option value. But with traded options, we've got the market value. So usually we calculate the implied volatility by working backwards. And the interest rate differential is the movement in the interest rates between the two countries, which will affect the price of the option. 2.4, valuing foreign exchange options. Now there's an added element, and I've seen this examined. We had Messrs. Garman and Colhagen extended the Black-Scholes-Merton model in 1983 to cope with the different risk-free rates in two currencies, because that's an element in the option price. And the model is very similar to Black-Scholes' model with the introduction of the foreign risk-free rate. We don't have to go into it in any more depth. Just be aware, Garman, Colhagen extended the Black-Scholes-Merton model for the pricing of foreign exchange options by recognizing the risk-free rate of the two countries involved. The pricing of non-deliverable forwards, so this is where, just like a forward agreement, except we're not exchanging, it's just the net amount that we exchange, follows the same process as section 2.1, the formula that I talked about. And by convention, the valuation of a non-deliverable forward is quoted in the deliverable currency, with the non-deliverable leg converted back to the deliverable currency, usually US dollars, based on the prevailing interest rate.